Where should we start today, Stugotz? Do you want to start with Lizzo playing an old historic flute that nobody knew about, but everyone is mad she now played, or with Freddie Gibbs dropping a new album? Do you think we should start in either one of those two places today, or should we just tell everybody how we banged our head yesterday and realized that the best place to go is Twitter if you want to know how to handle the effects of brain injuries? Because I do think it went very quickly yesterday from being horrified to everyone's an expert on what we should do about brain injuries as we try the oxymoronic task of trying to make a violent game safer when we don't have weight classes in the violent sports. This violent sport doesn't have weight classes like the other, and he's not as big as Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. So when he gets thrown around, sometimes he lands on his head.
It's interesting because you saw a lot of doctors on social media last night and a lot of people talking about this after the fact. I am going to give you, Dr. Le Batard, credit. You're the only one really that should be talking about this. You're the only one who asked us before the game, hey, would it make sense based on what we saw 4 days ago in Buffalo if Tua sat for a week and, came back 10 days from now? And we all rejected it. And I think I even laughed at you. But you did ask that question. You posed that question to us, and we all said no. And so I just found it interesting that after Tua gets hurt, after an independent doctor said it was not a concussion on Sunday in Miami when they were playing Buffalo, an independent doctor, I did find it, kind of interesting and a bit humorous that everyone turned into a doctor and was outraged at the NFL and what we were watching after the fact. That was interesting to me.
Let's talk to Chris Cody, Mike Ryan, and Whittingham about the part that horrified everybody, right? Because if you've been watching sports for a while, prayer circles, stretchers, neck braces, ambulance on the side of the field, but I can't recall seeing someone's hands like that in front of their face where you have athleticism short-circuiting because something's happened to the brain, and the fingers and the hands like that is not something I've seen in football before.
Yeah, and you're thinking about their family. That's like, I rarely get that context of an injury. Like, I'm usually just like thinking about selfishly about my football team. But in that moment, I see the fingers and I'm just like picturing his mom and dad watching that. And it was just like in my stomach, legitimately tough to watch.
I do think, though, that the collective, I think that what happens with these injuries and why everyone becomes Twitter doctors is the combination of two things. One is we all sort of experience a collective trauma together. We watch this guy lay prone on the ground and you wonder for his life, never mind for his health and being able to play again. You sort of completely forget that he's a football player and he's just a human being lying there. They go to 2 commercial breaks. They show you the injury a lot. We've had discussions before on the show. Right. I mean, we've had discussions on the show about how much television networks are obliged or not obliged to show injuries. And I think that's part of the trauma. So everyone experiences this traumatic moment and immediately the blame starts going in every different direction. And I think the second reason why everyone becomes a Twitter doctor is because who trusts this institution? The National Football League, the Miami not the Miami Dolphins, but any football team. There is this sort of thought out there that team doctors are incentivized to get players back out there, that the NFL doesn't really know how to deal with this stuff. No one trusts the protocol. No one trusts the independence of experts. And then immediately people recede into their corners of being a sports fan. And if you're a Dolphins fan, you don't want your team to seem negligent and treating their players as if just get them back out there. We don't actually care about Tua's health or life. Keep playing. And so you have like sort of the parochialism of sports fandom combined with the lack of trust in this institution and a very traumatic moment. You're just sitting at home watching television with a beer in hand, and all of a sudden you're confronted with this man's life in the hands of a medical team.
We have seen arms stiffen up after head collisions, but we've never seen a star quarterback's fingers just totally freeze up in awkward positions before. And what makes it worse is what we all witnessed on Sunday, which was what we all generally assumed was a concussion. I think a lot of what's happening is when you're watching football at home and someone has a head injury, you're usually pretty good at diagnosing when it's a concussion. We've seen enough combat sports, we've seen football enough to kind of notice the signs. And I understand why people are skeptical and don't want to trust independent neurologists that have been collectively bargained there. But I've also watched a divisional playoff game in which Patrick Mahomes was pulled from the game. There's plenty of instances where the protocol does work, and we're having a very difficult time reconciling what we saw on Sunday and what we're hearing, just because it looks so obvious to us that it was a concussion. But there's a natural explanation on the other end that what if it's his back seizing in 110-degree weather on the field? And that's more logical. It's the compounding of what we saw on Sunday on a short week when it's the only game in town on primetime Thursday with a star quarterback that led Twitter into this massive echo chamber / conspiracy theory wormhole that was a bit of a frustrating experience, because it wasn't just one set of independent neurologists that cleared him on Sunday. Then he got released from Cincinnati, and everybody felt from the University of Cincinnati's medical trauma team, and everyone thought that they knew better than that. And I don't think we have all the facts here. My biggest frustration, though, Dan, is that there's an ongoing investigation with this concussion. I think it's reasonable to ask, how long should that take? How long does it take to determine whether or not
be able to play, Mike, until that investigation is completed?
I don't understand why we're still waiting on the results of that investigation. I'm glad it's thorough, but we can't figure out if Tua had a concussion in 4 days.
The brain science is being worked out as the violent sport tries to get safer and figure out the rules. And we've seen, like, I don't remember who the quarterback was that came back into the game many years ago that led to the concussion protocol, because he had what they call that fencing stance of the arm going out. And it feels like a seizure. It looks like a seizure. And what Chris Cody said that is so very true about this, it's not just that it's the only game in town. Oh, wait, this isn't one of the disposable guys. This isn't one of the guys who matters less than the uniform, than the regional identity, than the colors that he's wearing. And on top of that, he's adorable. And the humanity that he's talking about, because so much of the humanity gets lost in those helmets, and so much of the pain is hidden by both masculinity and football, that when we see what we saw Sunday, Stugotz, where that's a boxing match called off. The referee, if someone moves the way Tua was moving, the fight ends. And I will say again that the weight differences in this sport matter. The quarterbacks haven't been this size before. When he gets thrown around, he gets ragdolled by the 300-pounders. He gets thrown on his head in a way you don't see very often with quarterbacks, because they've been historically a little bit bigger than this. But Cody, you wanted to say something.
Well, it's just I just blamed football last night. I'm kind of echoing like some of the points you guys are making. It's just it was so uncomfortable of everyone being so sure that he had a concussion last week, and it was just all these Twitter doctors, and I was just more upset at football. I was like, and you heard Richard Sherman and Whitworth talk about it at halftime. They're just like, look, this stuff happens. It's part of the game. Whitworth told a story of wanting to go back in when he had a concussion and how it needs to be obviously taken out of the player's hands. But this is just football, and these plays happen, and it's scary. And that was my takeaway. And then I go on Twitter, and it's just all these doctors, and it's just weird, man.
There are a lot of opinions. Chris Nowinski is going to join us, and a lot of people were coming after him because he was suing people. Now, this is a concussion expert, and he's
wanted for murder.
He wanted to charge the Dolphins with murder.
Well, he wanted to sue, fire, and murder, and charge for murder. So there were firing of staff and medicine. We'll talk to him at the end of this, because what do you do when one of the people who's actually informed is also way too emotional, and his language is off in the extremes? Because a lot of people were making fun of this person, but this person has devoted his life to studying this cause, and he is somebody who it has a PhD in neurology, in neuroscience.
I'm more comfortable. I'm sorry, Stugotz. No. I'm sorry. I should have given a hand signal.
Go, Mike.
Yep. I'm more comfortable hearing Chris Nowinski's opinion on what happened on Sunday than I am the average egg on Twitter, because I'm sure he recognizes a lot of the signs. But I keep going back to these are independent neurologists. They hold degrees. They studied. Yes. They actually took Tua in. It's not just what happened yesterday, which looked rather innocuous as a hit. And your point about quarterbacks being smaller is a good one. I think the fact that we saw what happened on Sunday, and then we see a rather innocuous hit have that kind of effect on Tua, the circumstantial evidence on Tua being concussed twice in the matter of 5 days is pretty overwhelming. At the same time, the rhetoric is a little dangerous. I feel like there's a pretty wide lane between let's hear this thing out and if he dies, I'm going to seek murder charges.
And I do think, and we recorded the interview last night, so it's worth noting that Chris Nowinski deals with this on an emotional level. He told us that he was going to see, I believe, the widow of a former teammate this week, and so when that's in the news on Sunday, and then this is in the news on Thursday, in the middle, you're dealing with a very emotional moment. Again, I think a lot of what plays into this is our emotional feelings. Reconciling our interest in football, I think, is one part of this. Reconciling the damage that this can do to people is incredibly difficult. And so I do think that Chris Nowinski is an activist here. He does kind of use incendiary language in part because he's someone who is trying to get our attention, as seemingly our attention on this issue has faded a bit. We are not as vigilant. We are not as, kind of going after the NFL about concussions anymore. In some ways, the lawsuit and the settlement has gotten this out of the news. We don't really question the NFL in the same way we did 5 years ago when it seemed like the sport was in peril, that mothers were going to stop sending their kids to go play football because it was too dangerous. They have dealt with this issue in a way that has made it palatable to the public. They send numbers out about how they are better in terms of concussions being down 50% year over year. The rule changes have worked. And so we have sort of been pacified as a viewing public. And I do think that it does sometimes take very extreme language to get people to pay attention.
Why are we so do people think this is like any given Sunday, that these doctors are I understand there's probably some pressure, but I just have to believe that these doctors are not going to send Tua out there if he has a fucking brain hemorrhage.
Especially an independent doctor.
That's
they
what
would
I'm
risk
saying,
their license. They would risk their job.
But
Chris and Stu,
just to put Tua back in a football game.
This is not any given Sunday.
These entities, though, don't have any credibility here. To answer your question, I do think some people think this is any given Sunday, because why would you trust? The NFL is big tobacco. That's who they are. That's what their corporate reputation is. They don't have any credibility. So yes, people are very skeptical of their concussion diagnoses.
Teddy Bridgewater did okay. They have other I know that there's not a lot of Mahomes out there, but you think that they're Tua is I don't care if he's gonna die out there. He's got to play. It just doesn't make business sense for them to risk that.
But let's talk about the distrust that Chris is talking about, because of course there were a lot of people, Whittingham, there were a lot of people, thank you for the correction, there were a lot of people who have less information than these independent doctors, but there are also a lot of people with opinions who aren't incentivized by everything that's happening around us in this sport to get people on the field. So when you have someone like Shannon Sharpe getting emotional because we all feel helpless and hopeless there, you see the hands. We haven't seen that before. It scares all of us. Jalen Waddle and the Dolphins were talking in the locker room about how hard it was to recover from that, because you see the hands that way and someone being carted off on a stretcher. And even Shannon Sharpe, who knows that beast, is emotionally going to Twitter. And what he said was pretty benign, but he took it down and apologized for it. He deleted it. And then in explaining why he had done that, he just said the Dolphins lied about the injury last week. And so that's Shannon Sharpe.
Right.
And he's telling you, coming from that sport during a different time, admittedly, he's just saying flatly with a microphone, the Dolphins lied last week. He's comfortable diagnosing what it is that we saw that it looked very much like a brain injury last week. It looked like someone who didn't have their faculties, was shaking their head, and we did feel like we knew more than the Dolphins. I think that if you ask most people watching football last week, is that a back or is that a brain? Most people are saying brain. We feel comfortable with that expertise.
But that shouldn't be part of the conversation, what people on Twitter think, right?
It should be noted that Mike McDaniel said that he was 100% certain that Tua did not have a concussion based off of what the doctors were telling him, and that's pretty strong. He's also said that as long as he's been a head coach, he doesn't play fast and loose with that. He's also been a head coach for 4 games.
Yeah.
Right. And also, we do have to sort of, I don't want to say have to, but the Dolphins side of the story is worth noting here. They say that he went through an independent concussion protocol. He had a back injury. He was cleared to, I presume, went through some testing again in order to play on Thursday night. And also, Tua Tagovailoa was released from the hospital, a University of Cincinnati hospital that apparently is a grade 1 head trauma center. And so this is not some sort of quack medical institution. This is a top level medical institution that was able to clear him to travel home. He went back to the Dolphins team bus wearing a neck brace, and he is, by all accounts, not good, but
not good enough. Not good enough for Hot Rod Danny on Twitter.
Right. And that's the thing, right? Is that, again, we are all very emotional at the end of watching that. No one wants to spend their Thursday night thinking about this stuff. We want to enjoy a football game. And people got very emotional, including emotional in defending the Dolphins. And I think in some ways the extremism on both sides is a little bit gross. Defending your team and, wanting to accuse the Dolphins for murder. Those are very extreme reactions. But I sort of, I understand.
Spectrum right there.
Right. I understand in the context of we're all trying to emotionally grapple with my team is not awful and this league is awful with this stuff. And you're trying to just figure it out on your own emotional level.
McDaniel saying, and I understand all of your points that you are making, and I actually believe McDaniel. He seems like a decent human being, but when he says the quote, I would never put a player in harm's way, and I'm like, what? You're a football coach. Like,
every Sunday you're doing that.
Aren't they all? Aren't they all in harm's way?
Right. It's all you do. It's like you're the only reason I know you is because what you do every Sunday is put everybody in harm's way.
But I
place them right in harm's way, like on a field.
Am I the idiot here that believes him that if he thinks Tua is genuinely concussed at 3-0, he's going to say, you know what, we'll go with Teddy? Am I the fool?
No, Chris, his whole thing, and we've spoken to him about this on the show and in person, look at me, Louie, is that he genuinely cares more about his players. He saw the lack of care that this quarterback in particular got previously. It seems as though 100% certainty is a really strong number. You can't be more certain than that. Again, I'm a little confused as to why it's taking so long to figure this part out. Was he concussed on Sunday? He feels pretty strongly. Their own team doctors on a short week. They
no, but Mike, that's the most important. I really believe that the point Mike is making is the most important point. They launched an investigation into what happened on Sunday. How do we not know by Thursday? And why is the player able to play before the investigation is over?
They're trying to get a hold of Dungy, Curtis Martin, and Jason Taylor and seeing if they could put together the Richie Incognito task force and get a couple of different expedient rulings on this. I do want to believe that McDaniel cares about human beings and cares about people. I will say that I think the reason that the reaction is what it was, I mean, there are a lot of reasons, but chief among them. No, well, the fame of the person does end up mattering, but it is also that all of us have not seen the hands in front of the face and no control of the fingers. What has just happened here are these seizure-like symptoms. This doesn't look even like we've seen before a guy get hit, Stugotz, and the arm goes out, and we have seen the arm stiffen. What I don't think I've seen in football is somebody with their fingers in front of the face and they look all sprawled in a way that the athleticism has short-circuited. It's not, the body is not working the way a human body works. I believe all of us were jarred by the vision of that. And then knowing the guy and it being the only game and the game pausing and then you feeling uncomfortable with the announcers going right back to the machine humming and the tone and the excitement as a guy is taken off the field that way.
You could tell the announcers were a bit hesitant, like they didn't know what to do. It's a tricky situation for them. But the optics, you're right, Dan, we've never seen that before. The optics on all of it, starting with Sunday, starting with a man going down in extreme heat, getting up, then stumbling. It looked like a concussion. And then fast forward to Thursday and what we saw last night, all of it looked bad. And you really, as Tua was being carted off the field there, you thought at least I did, me and my wife did watching the game, you were thinking, I think a lot of people were, a worst case scenario. And it's good to hear at least that, he has full movement of his extremities and he was smiling and had the neck brace on and went home with his team, even though Twitter didn't think he should have went home last night. He should have stayed in the hospital for another couple of nights, which is absurd and ridiculous. But no, I've never seen anything like that before, Dan. Never. In all my years watching football, I don't think any of us have ever seen a player have a reaction to being hit like the reaction we saw from Tua last night. It was jarring. I didn't question what I was watching. I didn't question my love for the sport. It's just one of those moments in that sport where it was super jarring. And so I'm not going to blame announcers or fans for getting back into the game a couple of minutes later. They have a job to do. And quite frankly, I was into the game a couple of minutes later while still thinking about, hey, I hope Tua's okay.
I mean, we all know that football is super dangerous. We were having this discussion when Dan, with the history reflecting back on it, was right. They shouldn't have put Tua out there because look at this nightmare. I'm sure retroactively everybody wishes Tua wasn't out there considering what happened, but this is the sport. Please don't show Chris Nowinski Dana White's Contender Series because he'll go Harvey Dent on everybody.
Right. But, Mike, Tua wants to play. Dan was right. Dan said take a week off, and now we're all saying, hey, they probably should. Tua, the player, wants to play. Maybe we all want him to take off, but if you've asked the player, and maybe the player should make that decision.
Players always want to play.
I know, but he wants to play, and he feels like he's good enough to play, and he trusts the doctors who cleared him to play.
That's where the incentive system breaks, right? The team doctors want him back out there. He wants to be back out there, and who knows if that independent person is strong enough to deny everything from happening there.
So you mentioned strong enough, right? And you keep giving me credit for being right. I wasn't right, Stugotz. I was talking about lower body extremity stuff. I was talking about his hips and his back and his feet. And another reason I wasn't right is because the pressure you guys exerted. Now, I am strident in my opinions. I know I'm obnoxious sometimes. I have a history doing this journalistically, giving opinions that has confidence behind it. And the room was so against me yesterday that I made the point of saying, hey, I haven't studied his charts. I'm not saying he shouldn't start. I'm just pointing out we're 3 weeks in and already a guy who's small for the position and has an injury history already. We're in a position where we're saying banged up. That game decided, Stugotz. Xavier Howard has to leave the game with a groin injury. Gets decided right there. 3rd and 11 play. Everybody is covering Tyreek Hill because he's the first receiver the Dolphins have ever had. Stugotz, the numbers on him are crazy. He's got now 2 10-catch, 150-yard games, multiple games. The number of Dolphin receivers who have done that ever is 0. He's the only one, and he's done it in 4 games. And he's the only one to do it since last year in the league when he did it. When he's 10 catches for 150 yards, the whole defense of the Bengals is watching him, and the Dolphins say, hey, Howard, we trust you on their second guy. It's 3rd and 11. We trust you to cover their second receiver. Higgins goes for a touchdown. Howard is now hurt as well. And
very nice timing on that injury for him. He's like, oh, once I got burnt on a touchdown, my groin hurts a little more now.
Chris, he was carrying an injury
Chris
going
is right.
into
It's
it.
like the year
Revis.
No, Revis was guarding Moss.
He wasn't practicing.
No, Chris is right. Hold on a second. Chris is right. Revis was guarding Randy Moss in the game, and Moss scorched him for a second touchdown, and all of a sudden, Darrell Revis pulled up with a groin injury. It's that was perfectly timed injury.
It is Ted. It's so Ted. It was
Well
Ted.
said.
All of
well
last
said.
night
Jumped
was
off the
Ted.
screen how Ted it was.
It was so Ted.
We all knew what he meant. He didn't have to finish the word.
It's true. We
Thank
did
you.
know. We do know what he meant. I love that
speak fluent Stugotz by now. I mean,
we went from analyzing who was secretly filming the Dolphins walkthrough, who from Barstool should be punished. Wait a minute, that stadium is always open to the public. Wait a minute, McDaniel's so smart that he was only running plays with 12 guys on offense during the walkthrough.
fake plays.
And then it all gets short-circuited when a guy who's smaller than most of the people on the field again gets ragdolled. I'm telling you, quarterbacks for the Dolphins that I've seen, I don't see them get thrown that way on their head. It happens to him a decent amount because he doesn't weigh very much. He's small. Like the people who are tackling him have like 100 pounds on him.
It's uncomfortable. Part of the reason that we were saying go out there with the back and ankle if your team doctors say give it a go is because even yesterday, last night, and that the head trauma, that's a data point. This is a guy that is always getting hurt. Is he getting hurt because of his size? Is he? We saw this with Robert Griffin III. He just had this unbelievable skill to get hit harder than everybody else, and it short-circuited his career. This is an interesting discussion.
Say, Mike, I was actually going to say, Mike, I have not seen this kind of negligence about an athlete's health since RG3's entire career, like his entire professional career.
But Dan, how much of that was negligence from the Washington football team staff, and how much was it that, you know, Robert Griffin III just wasn't built for this at the pro level against those big guys? And it's a conversation that we had entering the season about Tua and his health. He hasn't been available for a large chunk of the games available to him. And this is just more data, as scary and as callous as it sounds. And now you have less draft capital to make a decision on him at the end of the year, too, because of the tampering stuff.
Stugotz, when you say Tua wants to be out there, think about the amount of pressure on Tua. This is the most exciting Dolphin season this century. He's playing for his job this year. We all know this is all or nothing. He has overcome injuries. He's got a new coach, and you see everything lined up, incentivized to get him on the field. What about you, Stugotz? If you're the independent neurologist trying to make a judgment call on science when you need a lot of information and it's not the easiest decision to make when you have the pressure of everything around you. You want to be independent, you want to be neutral, but you're borderline. You're not sure. And everyone who's on that field doesn't want to be the person who costs the game. No one on that field, not a doctor, not a referee, everyone who's playing out there, the national pastime is out there, and we're all watching a single game, and nobody wants to be responsible on that field for the losing. No one wants to be blamed for that. You see how that can be. Yes, you want, obviously, the Hippocratic Oath. You want doctors to be fundamentally neutral. But do you see how all of the pressure from everywhere makes it so the doctor's the only one advocating for that? He's literally the only one who is advocating for safety at the center of the violence in something that can't be safe.
Dan, I would like to think, and I'm just going back to the Buffalo game, that an independent doctor with his reputation at stake, who has no stake, who has no, doesn't have a horse in the race here, okay? He's not a Bills doctor. He's not a Dolphins doctor. He's an independent doctor. I'd like to think that he put Tua through whatever test he had to put Tua through and allowed him back into the game because that doctor, and he didn't care what anyone else said, he didn't care about the pressure. I'd like to think, I could be wrong, I could be naive, I'd like to think that doctor put him back in the game because all his years of studying medicine and studying his craft and working at his craft said to him, hey, this player, he's fine. He's not concussed. He can go back into the football game.
But everyone is thinking that he's lying, though, correct? Like, everyone is thinking that after we all saw it, Stugotz, we saw him wobble. We didn't think it was a back. Nobody thought it was a back. We saw him clearing his head. We saw him shaking his head. Like, none of us, why do we all think that the independent doctor is lying?
I don't.
I don't think he's lying, Dan. That's what I'm trying to say. I'd like to think that independent doctor is doing his job.
Because we were all surprised, Dan, because we were all surprised Tua came back out, because we were all pretty good at knowing what a concussion looks like at this point. And we didn't have the information about the back injury at the time. It looked like your standard, it looked worse than your standard concussion. So for him to come back out, it was shocking. And what makes this a national controversy now is the combination of things. And yet, we're all comfortable making this assumption that it was more people than not are very comfortable saying what happened on Sunday was a breakdown of the protocol, that the independent neurologist was wrong. I think that's way too much of a bridge too far for me to actually go out and say that. I'm not a neurologist. I don't pretend to be one. It looked pretty circumstantial and overwhelming that he was hit in the head, because I saw his head bounce off the turf and then him lose balance. I understand why people feel passionately about this, but we're not an independent neurologist. They have protocols that have ripped away the best quarterback in the league from a divisional playoff game. We have seen plenty of players adhere to this protocol, and it's way more often than not that a player is just removed from the game than allowed to come back. I trust the protocol. It does work.
And I do think that is certainly worth noting. I've been fairly cynical about it, and I think that the NFL deserves some modicum of credit here because, like you said, there have been high-profile examples of players being pulled from games. And also, if we're talking about incentives, the independent neurologist does represent the NFL, and the NFL has paid out hundreds of millions of dollars of settlement money for how poorly they've handled this issue. It is in their best interest to, at the very least, be seen to look like they're handling this issue better than they have in the past from a legal standpoint, from a financial standpoint. It is in their incentive to do so, but I think this industry is big tobacco, and I'm going to be cynical of it until they completely prove or we have a test that can definitively test for concussions because the protocols only go so far. My instinct is to be cynical about this organization, and I think that they have earned that.
And you have every right to be. I'm just saying the optics on this particular injury, where it looked like a boxing injury. The football player gets knocked out. He stands up. His knees collapse. He stumbles. He falls to the ground again. Like, Chris, I just want you to think about this. Everyone saw that, and everyone assumed concussion. That's what a concussion looks like. And then he went into the locker room, and that independent doctor knew what everyone saw because he saw the same thing. He went into that locker room, and he said, after all of that, stumbling, the hit, everything, and said, hey, Tua, you're not concussed. You're fine. Go back into the game. Like, I just want you to think about that. There's no way that doctor caved into some sort of peer pressure and put Tua back into the game because the league or the NFL or the Dolphins wanted him back in the game.
Fair enough, but if there is pressure on Tua, if he wants to stay in the game, if the pressure is strong as I think it is, there is incentive for him to say it's my back. I'm not answering questions honestly about my head.
Yeah, but they're not asking his back what their name is and all the concussion baseline tests.
I know, but they ask those questions and let him back into the game.
I don't know how he answered those questions.
I don't know how he answered those questions.
We don't know the questions. I really don't think one of the questions is, how's your head? Actually, it's my back. Oh, my bad. Go ahead.
But whatever the questions were, got the answer that let him back into the game. And I don't know what cleared up before he was answering questions. I'm telling you that the players are incentivized to lie about their heads because they know if they say stuff about their heads, they're going to be taken out of the game.
You're 100% right. But Dan, we don't know the answers to the questions that were asked, but the doctor does. And the doctor said, hey, don't we have to trust the doctor there?
The spotters,
the questions, he gave the answers, he put Tua back in.
The spotters do what we do on TV, which is like, that looks like a concussion. Test him to see if he has a concussion. It's not like, what did you hurt there? And then they go and test something. I understand the point that you're making. I'm just clearing it up for the audience because it sounds like the baseline test is, what happened there? Oh, I hurt my back. That's not necessarily how it goes.
Seems insensitive to bring it up, but Jason Sanders really skating today with this conversation.
You're right. You're totally
I know it ended up being like a 12-point game or whatever, but that game with a field goal made here or there, an extra point, just a different vibe. I don't know.
No, he missed a field goal to put him up 9-7, missed an extra point. You're right. Jason Sanders is skating today.
Better than Olindo Mare, please.
You also think that Xavier Howard left that game because of shame yesterday.
Dan, he was getting. I've never seen that. They're just like Herbstreit's just like they are going at
Higgins
Howard.
Is good. Higgins is good.
Chris,
I know it's because he was hurt. I know
it was an injury report, and he wasn't questionable because of possible shame.
Don't play. Don't play. It's not. But so you're saying? Do you think he tweaked it more?
Don't play.
No, I think he had a fracture.
Guess who else was questionable, Chris? T. Higgins. He played. He looked all right.
No, he participated full in practice. I saw that practice report all week. He missed the first day of practice. He was practicing the rest of the week. I'm just saying.
The practice they didn't participate was a 12-man on offense walkthrough.
You're sure we're gonna do this thing again? We're all doctors. So you're saying
but there's Howard playing hurt.
I'm just saying he tried to play hurt. It failed, and then he was like, "I'm done. Let me put some ice on my hamstring so people think it's the injury."
right before we turned the microphones on, Stugotz and I were talking about, I wish I had green smocks. I wish we had stethoscopes. I wish I wish all of us had been in.
I want the light on the head that goes around like the band with a light at the end.
Well, you're making it a minor. You're making
I don't
it
know
a
what you did there.
No, they have that like little metal
have those,
circle.
yes.
It's like a little dish. I'm not even sure what that does. It's like a mirror that goes
No
down.
idea.
I had him as a minor too, Dan. That was weird.
the green stuff. We want to wear a nurse's smock. I wanted us all to be dressed that way.
I'm wearing booties.
Tonight, you can see the booties of Chris Cody and Mike Ryan at Miami City Magic City Casino. We've got on 37th Avenue, right off of 836. I've got a question for you, Stugotz. We left the show yesterday with a cliffhanger. Did Abby throw away the Russell Wilson bread that you're claiming was in the freezer and has not molded and has great value? Where are we on the Russell Wilson bread that we think has a lot of value?
Dan, I can't find it.
She threw it out.
I believe she did.
Oh no.
Is she
I put a
copping
note
to
on
it?
it. I put a note on the baggie that said, "Please don't throw out."
You told
ever.
us you told us yesterday you got the phone with her and she said it was in the freezer or something.
Dude, Chris.
She lied to me.
Oh, she lied to you. Great.
Yes,
you weren't lying to us to get out of work at 10:30. Got it.
She lied to me. I mean, I'm just telling you. I can't believe she did it.
We did talk about how the game sort of moved on after the injury. I do think that maybe the PA announcer didn't have to come on and go, "It's third down."
They always have to, Chris. They always have to.
Not after that
Yes.
injury.
No,
not
always.
not after the
Football
injury.
game.
Always. If I'm
Not
in my
after the
phone,
injury.
I need someone to tell me when it's third down. I need that.
Not after that injury.
How about before the injury where Tua had like one of the best throws ever where he dropped it over that linebacker and then like the
Amazing.
next throw, a terrible deep pass. It was just like Tua in a nutshell, like an accurate mid-range pass and then a terrible deep ball.
Yeah, but those mid-range passes, like 20 to 25 yards, he's so great at them. I know.
Dropping him over a linebacker.
But that's what the team looks like when Teddy Bridgewater is running the offense. Like
He looked good at points. He
Oh,
didn't look
stop it.
terrible.
He threw the
Shuffle
furthest
pass.
balls I have seen him throw since Louisville. He
It
looked
took
deep ball.
so much. He threw
Better than Tua. His deep ball.
This is the greatest tribute I can give to Tyreek Hill is that Teddy Bridgewater has to throw the ball as fast and as hard as he can to make sure that it gets there at the same time that Hill is there. Like, it is so hard to overthrow that dude.
I imagine he felt that throw to Tyreek Hill like in his obliques, that there wasn't a body part that wasn't completely in agonizing pain after reaching for everything he had for that
he
throw.
He should have gone into the concussion protocol after that throw because of how much it hurt every part of his body to throw the ball that far downfield.
It was a beautiful throw, too, because it went so high. It was a beautiful throw. It looked like a SpaceX rocket just going on the horizon. It was just gorgeous.
And his escapability from some like closing, like I have to.
I didn't think he could run. He ran for 11
like,
yards.
As a backup quarterback, that's a good back. I think with this
right
schedule,
back to the game. Look
we're
at you, right back to the game.
Like,
right
look,
back
we're
to the
assuming
backup.
he flew back with the team. Let's. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna give a prognosis of like 6 to 8 weeks for Tua. All right. I think with this easy schedule, like we're gonna go 500 with Teddy at least. We're gonna.
Teddy's good. That's why you signed Teddy Bridgewater. I thought he looked good. The interception that he threw was bad, but also there were a lot of Twitter doctors last night and a lot of Twitter sleuths that said that wasn't necessarily an interception. It looked like the ball hit the ground. I would have liked to have seen a replay there. I came away yesterday. I know it was a double-digit loss, especially when you apply the context of what happened to Tua. I think that the Miami Dolphins are good.
Yep.
I am bullish on the Dolphins.
Run defense
I'm worried
is
about
solid.
the Bengals. I'm really worried about the Bengals. That is supposed to be a matchup that Burrow and Chase should go off. The Dolphins held Chase in check. Zach Taylor was overthinking everything. How do you not go for it on 4th and inches from the 1? The running game isn't online. I think I'd much rather be the Dolphins than the reigning AFC champs, even with a Tua injury.